Today, as we speak about the Epiphany, the wise men, the Magi coming to see Jesus, they are coming to seek the King. They are drawn to the light. And so as we take a look at that, when have you ever been drawn to something and didn't know exactly where it was going to take you? You and I, when we go on a road trip, we typically will set the course in our GPS. We'll know kind of where we're going, and sometimes the GPS is going to tell us, no, don't go that way. There's an accident. There's a quicker route, and we'll find our way. I can remember way back in the day, I think this was like 100 years ago, I don't even know how I navigated with a road map, but I can remember coming up on something and just choosing while I was driving, get off the highway, drive on the country roads, and somehow I still found my way. God is always trying to lead us. He's trying to guide us. He seeks to give us not just a knowledge of the way, but also He reveals Himself along the way. That's why Jesus Christ said, I am the way and the truth and the life. And He invites us to be on the way with Him. Here in the gospel lesson today from Matthew chapter 2, we have the Magi who are coming and they're looking for Jesus. They're seeking Him. Who are they? We traditionally call them wise men. Sometimes we've called them in song three kings. Who were they? What were they? They were probably astronomers. They understood and studied the stars. They understood when there was a new star or a different appearance. They were probably one part astrologers as well, because they put meaning to the stars, not in the sense that people do when they read their horoscope, but they understood there to be some sort of significance or meaning when stars appeared. And for these, they probably also had an understanding of prophecy from the Old Testament, because the people of Israel had been captive in one time in the east, probably in the area of today, Iran. And so as these wise men or Magi are making their way, they're being led by this star. They knew that there was something going on, and they attach it with this birth of a king. And the star leads them, and they come to Jerusalem, and they say, where's he who has been born King of the Jews? Jerusalem was the capital city. That's where the king would be born. But they can't find the king, no matter how they look. And so they ask King Herod. And they say, where's the one born King of the Jews? King Herod, who was not a Jewish person, who was just a ruler who was installed and was very much a despot. He calls upon the religious leaders to help him interpret what's going on. And they explain to him that the Messiah was to be born in Bethlehem. And so these Magi then continue their journey to Bethlehem. They are following the star. They are following the light. They are going to see Jesus. And when they see Him, they are overjoyed. They bow down and worship. They bring their gifts. Now, I'm thinking to myself, Jesus ultimately is the one who lights the way for them. They're finding the light of the world as they're being led by that star. If there's anything that children in our preschool learn in our chapel lessons, every single Wednesday in chapel, we light a candle. And we asked them, why do we light this candle? And they all say, they shout it out, because Jesus is the light of the world. Maybe you can say that. You can sound like the children. Why do we light the candles? Because Jesus is the light of the world. And boy, do we live in a world that needs not just a little light, but needs the brightness of God's grace, His goodness, and His love. So those Magi who followed a literal star find, when they come to Jesus, the one who is the light of the world, God in the flesh, God incarnate. And in the Old Testament lesson for today from Isaiah 60, it talks about the need for that light that Jesus brings. This is why Jesus was on this mission to come to earth, to come and be and live among God's people, to live and experience everything that it means to be human, to then go to the cross and die and rise again. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness is over the peoples. But the Lord rises upon you, and his glory appears over you. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. To people dwelling in darkness, that would be everybody in this world apart from God. God sends the one true light. In fact, in John's gospel, when it introduces Jesus, it says of Jesus that he is the light who is promised to come, and that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Jesus is the light that no darkness can snuff out, no darkness can cover. And think about that just as a metaphor for a second. And maybe ask yourself, who do I know? Who is it that I think about? Who comes to mind as someone who dwells in darkness and needs the light that only Jesus can bring? And as you ask that question, perhaps someone does come to mind. Someone who's living in darkness, they're having trouble finding their way. They're not sure where life leads. They need some guidance. Ultimately, they, like all of us, need the light of Jesus Christ to bring the light of life to them. I imagine for many of us, we have people that we're praying for. And if we're not being intentional in doing that, this would be an opportunity or a prompt to be praying for someone who needs the light of Christ. Because dwelling in darkness, the darkness of sin, the darkness of death, the darkness of uncertainty, the darkness that comes with living in this world is no party. So who is it that you're praying for? Maybe today, write their name down. Put it on a Post-it note. Stick it someplace where you're reminded to pray for them. Put it on the mirror. Put it at your desk or at your table where you sit down to have your cup of coffee. And remember to pray for that person who needs God's light. And as you pray, ask God to reveal to you how you can be a part of that enlightenment, that enlightening them. Because in that Old Testament lesson, when it speaks about it, the Lord rises upon you, you and you and you and you and you and me. He rises upon us. His glory appears over us, and people will come to that light that we reflect. As it says, nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. I wonder what it was like for those Magi as they made their way back and they get back to their hometown. You know, people will have known that they have been on a long trip. They might know what the purpose of the trip was. They might know that these wise men had been following a star. Could you imagine the conversations? So what'd you find there? We found the one who's the light of the world. What did you do there? We bowed down. We worshiped him. What difference did it make? We were filled with joy. Something that we don't experience on a daily basis, at least in the way that we experienced it when we bowed down before him, before the Messiah. What's that mean? You can have joy too. You can have peace. Can you imagine? Going back, they didn't just stay mum and say, oh, yeah, it was a trip. It was a good time. You know, we stopped at, we ate at a restaurant that we don't have here, like In-N-Out Burgers in Jerusalem. They didn't do that. They took to heart the fact that they had encountered the Messiah. And that so fills our hearts with God's love, with his peace, with his power, that we can't help but show that and share that. And so as we pray for the people who are dwelling in darkness, the people who are either in our family, in our neighborhood, in our workplace, where we recreate, wherever it may be, when you see that darkness cover their face, pray for them that God's light would shine upon them. And ask the Lord to open your heart as I ask the Lord to open mine, so that that light of Christ would shine through me and transform their lives with the power and the knowledge of who He is. Pulling in the second lesson for today from Ephesians, Paul talks about this mystery that is now revealed. That word is used over and over and over again. And when he says this mystery is now revealed, what he's saying is it doesn't need to be a mystery anymore. God's purposes, God's ways, God's desire for all people is that they would know God's Son. Why? Because something comes with God's Son, this reality that in Him and through faith in Him, we may approach God with freedom and confidence. I would imagine for anybody who's dwelling in darkness, they think that, maybe I don't want to go too near to God because that God, I don't know what He thinks about me. I don't know what He feels about me. But this God that we worship, who sent His Son, He is crazy about you and me. So in love with us that He would let nothing, absolutely nothing, stand in the way. And you and I are those who can help that mystery be revealed. How to do that? That's kind of better topic left for a different day. But let me say this. My hope, my prayer, my dream for this event that we have coming up on the Saturday of Super Bowl weekend, my prayer is that so many people from Prince of Peace and from other churches will take part in that they'll be able to understand better how is God's plan for me. How is it easier than I even dreamt simply to build relationships with people, be praying for them, and asking that God's light would shine on them so that they would see the King, so that they would worship Jesus, so that they would have this confidence to approach God's throne of grace, so that the light would fill their eyes and their hearts, and that His light would then reflect through them. Becoming an everyday missionary is simply being available to God and praying that He'll use you, and then doing those things that He opens the door for. Just take one step through. Because people deep down, they're longing for something that only Jesus can bring. And you and I are a part of that plan to share His love with all people, to give them the hope and the peace that comes through Jesus, who is the light of the world. In His name, amen.